Brother Joy sighed. He unbuttoned his shirt and took it off. His body was astonishing, so white and plump as he stood there in nothing but underpants. He held his wet shirt against the cut over his eye to stop the flow of blood. I could hear his car start up and leave. "Are you okay?" I said. "I'll be fine," he said. "Why did you wish him luck?" I said. "Because they'll need it," he said. "They hit you, stole your car, your clothes, and your money. All the luck in the world won't help them where they're headed," he said, as if he hadn't heard me. "Where's that?" I said. "The wrong way," he said. I said, "Oh boy." "They're on a dark path," he said. "They are groping their way towards destruction. It's a terrible, terrible thing to see people throw their lives away like that." "You feel sorry for them?" I said. "I do," he said. "Indeed I do. They've turned their backs on joy. They no longer believe. Some dire fate awaits them. It's just a matter of time." I walked out of the bathroom. I needed air, even though I didn't have any pants or shoes. I couldn't get over it. Here was a man, wet and cold and nearly naked, practically blind, one eye swollen shut and the other just about as useless, in a roadside toilet. His car and his belongings had just been stolen. He was left with a car that probably didn't work, and he felt sorry for the thieves, the very men who had robbed him at gunpoint. We could have been killed, and he felt sorry for them. I wanted to scream at him. What if I'd been shot? Would that have made you happier? But it wasn't worth it. He had an answer for everything. He came out of the bathroom buttoning the wet, blood-stained shirt, as if that made him presentable. It only made him look more foolish. His legs were white as giant mushroom stems. His face had the cut, the swollen eye, and the grease smears. The sunlight made him squint his good eye, squishing his face up like a man who just stepped on a skunk. He had the other set of keys in his hand. "Let's go see if it runs," he said. "It won't work," I said. "No harm in trying," he said, and he walked over toward the car. Before I knew what had happened, he was making a kind of yipping sound, like some small dogs do, and he sat down on the ground. "What's wrong?" I said, coming up behind him. He was holding his left foot. I could see it was bleeding quite badly, and the sight made me queasy, made me forget myself. "Shit," I said. It was what the guys nearly always said when anything happened. "No need for that," he said, gritting his teeth and squeezing his foot. "How did you do it?" I asked. "I must have stepped on some glass," he said, "or metal, sharp. Ooh. Does it hurt much?" I said. "I'll be all right," he said. He was looking at the cut. "Don't see anything in there now. Squeeze here a moment, will you?" I wanted nothing to do with his foot or the cut, but I couldn't let him bleed to death. I put my hands where he showed me and squeezed as hard as I could. He took off his shirt, wrapped it around his foot, and tied it tightly, stemming, I hoped, the flow of blood. While he was doing that, I decided I'd earned the right to challenge his faith. "You don't see this as a blessing, do you?" I said. He was still grimacing in pain, but he gave a half laugh. "No," he said, "it's an accident. They happen all the time. I can't say I'm glad it happened. The question, though, is how to deal with it." "Joyfully," I said. This time he did laugh. "That, and maybe a doctor, a few stitches, maybe a tetanus shot," he said. He stood up, and I helped support him as he hopped over to the car. The back side of his underpants was covered with dirt. By the driver's door, he held onto the roof of the car for support and said, "Maybe it did have a good purpose after all." I looked at him. "You helped me without my asking," he said. "That's a good sign." I can't tell you how ridiculous this man looked, flabby and white, dressed in his dirty underwear, his battered face scrunched up, with his shirt tied around his foot, and finding purpose in it all. "You're welcome," I said. He got into the car. I was sure it wouldn't start, or maybe they'd rigged it to blow Brother Joy to kingdom come. It started right away. Brother Joy smiled and raised his hands. "We're in luck," he said. "Hop in." "Why would they leave us their car?" I said. "It doesn't make sense." "Don't look a gift horse in the mouth," said Brother Joy, and he backed up and pulled onto the highway. I asked him if he could drive with his foot, one eye, and no glasses, and he said he'd be fine. The car was an automatic. He could drive with one foot. I could see redness seeping through the shirt on his foot. He was leaning over the steering wheel, squinting harder than ever, straining to catch a glimpse of the road. In some respects, we were in a better car than Brother Joy's. Larger, more room, bucket seats, it had a radio, but I didn't dare turn it on. I would have liked rock and roll, but I knew Brother Joy would turn it into some gospel station. I could not bear to hear that howling sound. We drove in silence. I could see goosebumps on Brother Joy's legs. His legs were whiter than eggshells. It was as if the skin had never seen the sun. "We'll have to find the nearest place," he said, "to report our stolen car, and then I need medical attention." "I'd settle for my pants," I said. He looked over at me and smiled. Well, we didn't have to find the police. Sirens came blaring from behind. Red and blue lights were whirling all around us. A car pulled us over, forcing us from the road. There was one more at our side and at least one other behind us. I was confused. The rain had stopped and there was enough light left that I could see an officer leap out of the far side of the car ahead of us, parked at an angle that prevented our further advance. He braced his arms on the roof of the car. He was pointing a gun at us. He shouted something like, "You are surrounded. Come out with your hands up." It immediately occurred to me that they thought we were the skinny one-armed man and the big guy with the cowboy hat. We were decoys. That's why they'd left the car. "Jesus Christ," I said. "This is no time to curse," said the Reverend Joy. "They're going to shoot us." "It's a misunderstanding," said Brother Joy. "I will take care of this." He rolled the window down and shouted, "Don't shoot. We are not who you think we are." There was a pause, then someone yelled, "Just come out with your hands where we can see them." "We are not who you think we are," Brother Joy shouted again. Then, before he opened the door and got out, he spoke my name and put his hand on my shoulder. "This is exactly what I was talking about," he said. "One of those times when everything seems to be going wrong. You have to trust in God and turn it around. See it as an occasion for joy." This time I could not stop myself. "You're crazy," I said. "Do you know that?" "No, you don't. How could you? You're really crazy." For the first time a sad look came over Brother Joy's face. "I'm sorry you think so," he said. And he got out of the car, lurching pathetically, limping, hopping, hobbling, his hands in the air, his belly flopping over his underwear, no pants or shoes, just the bloody shirt tied around one foot, his mangled face looking like some extra in a cheap horror movie. What the cops, expecting hardened felons, must have thought, I have no idea. Maybe the crime doesn't pay. I stayed in the car. He spoke with the police. Guns drawn, they put his arms behind his back, handcuffed him, and put him in the back seat of one of the police cars. Then, having rendered that threat harmless, they came over to me. They stood outside the red car, 4 or 5 of them, with their guns drawn, pointing at the ground. "Open the door," said one. I did. I got out, hands in the air. "That's not him," said one of them. "No, I'm not," I said. "Face the car," said the one who'd ordered me out. "Put your hands behind your back." "It's a kid," I heard one of them say. "That's right," I said, confessing to something I would never admit to under ordinary circumstances. "Those 2 men took our car. We were going camping." "We'll see," said the man behind me. I was led over to another car and put in the back seat. When we got to the police station, they gave me a blanket. It was scratchy but warm, and I felt better when I could cover my bare legs. They put me in a cell with Brother Joy. Neither one of us said a word. He was staring at his feet, without the hush puppies. They asked us our names, said they were going to run a check. In spite of my predicament, that caught my interest. I wouldn't mind knowing the Reverend Joy's true identity. My guess was something like Charlie Hatfield or Elmer McCoy. But the computer confirmed that he was, by birth, or hailing, William J. Joy. That surprised me. He was actually who he said he was. They took me out of the cell and asked me a lot of questions. I stuck to the story, the truth, about camping, the rain, the tire, stopping at the rest area, the 2 men who took our car. I gave them their names, but they said they were probably using aliases. They asked me questions about Brother Joy. Was he my father? What had happened to our pants? Had he done anything unusual to me? I told them no, repeating that the one-armed man and Dickie, the big man in the cowboy hat, had taken our pants along with the car. They couldn't seem to understand why anyone would steal our pants. I didn't feel qualified to explain it to them. A doctor was summoned to attend to Brother Joy's foot and his head. That was my first, and to date only, night in jail. Mrs. Joy and my mother arrived around noon the next day, identified us, gave us pants, socks, and shoes, fresh shirts. Nobody said too much on the ride home. My mother drove. Brother Joy was quiet except for sneezing and coughing and blowing his nose. He would fall asleep, then moan and wake up. His foot was bothering him, and he had a terrible headache. He was a pitiful sight, and I felt bad that I'd shouted at him. The police told us that the bank robbers, for that is what they were, had not been apprehended, but Brother Joy's car had been found, abandoned. It was being held as evidence, but would be returned to him as soon as possible. I was relieved to have pants on again, and that the trip was over. I could hardly wait to get with my friends again and tell them the story about the one-armed man with a gun. Bank robbers. By the time I got to do it, it was even better than what had happened. The bit about the pants, which I had not appreciated at the time, always got everybody's attention. I left out the part about telling the Reverend Joy that he was crazy. In fact, Brother Joy hardly appeared in the story at all. And after that trip, I never saw him again. On the way home, my mother seemed resigned and heavy of heart, as if her last hope for me had gone awry, indicating that I was not meant to be saved or some such awful thing. Remembering the promise I'd made before the rain had started to fall, I had to wonder if somehow I hadn't been. Saved, I mean. That night she tucked me into bed with more care than usual, and she asked me, "Are you all right?" I knew she meant all that had happened, and I was certainly relieved that it was over, both the camping trip and the encounter with the robbers. I was glad to be home, safe in my bed, and I was more grateful than I had ever been for the love of my mother. I said, "Mom, you don't have to worry about me. I think God is big enough to save us both, don't you?" She hugged me and cried. It was some serious crying, but I knew it was a happy crying, too, out of relief. Tears of joy, I guess I'd have to say. How strange. It was dark in that room, and no one could see, so I released a few tears of my own. Looking back, I'd say they broke the hard shell that I had built around my heart, and watered the seeds of my faith, which is still strong in me to this day.